Okay, we are back live with another Between the Pages book chat, and today we have fantasy author Joshua Kern, and he's here to discuss his series, The Dungeon Alaria, and I'm going to turn it over to him now to introduce himself, so take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. My name, like she said, is Joshua Kern. I'm based out of Elizabeth, Colorado, teeny tiny town. You'll probably never be able to find it on any map. I started writing a few years ago out of necessity, more or less, because where I was living at the time just did not have jobs. And it morphed into me writing this series that I really enjoy. I mean, I've always been a huge fan of fantasy, pretty much any kind, urban fantasy, gamelit, portal, and that morphed from one series to another to my current one, which is the Dungeon Alaria.
Okay, so why don't you give everyone an overview of your book, what it's about?
Okay, it takes place in a fictional world called Alaria with a kid from Earth by the name of Liam. He's transported there with his house at the beginning of the first book, and finds out that the mother he thought he watched die when he was like 8 years old in the car accident had actually been transported to Alaria then. And through a series of adventures, mishaps, miscommunications, he finds out that his mother is actually originally from the world of Alaria, but had been transported to Earth originally a few years before his birth. And the second book just takes place, picks up where the first one left off, obviously, and gives you more information on their family, the dynamics of the world, and how everything works together with the dungeons. And the dungeons in this story are a little bit different from other gamelit stories. I'm not going into detail about each level, about the traps, about building them. I'm instead focusing on how the dungeons help the world itself survive. I mean, they're an integral part of the ecosystem in this story. It's not just you go into this dungeon to prevent dungeon waves where monsters come to the surface or to get loot, become richer, stronger, etc. In this story, the dungeons help purify the bad atmosphere of the world, allowing people to survive while also giving them food and supplies that they can't grow because of the atmosphere. And the story goes into how this atmosphere came to be, and at the end of the book, Liam and his group kind of fix the issue.
Yeah, well, it's always
less worse, I guess.
It's always kind of because you want the sequel, don't you?
Yeah, and I mean, I end the book with the wording that it's the end of that series, and I'm kind of regretting it now because it's not the end of the series; it's the end of the arc. Because this book, it's part of a duology that tied in directly with another of my series, The Game of Gods. But that tie-in is now over. And so I wanted to start the next part of the series under a new banner to let that be known. And I've had complaints from people saying, you know, I don't want it to end. I want to keep up reading about my new friends and all this stuff. When in reality, it's just the end of the arc. It wasn't the end of, you know, the actual series. It was going to be put under a new one. So.
Well, it's the end of that series. You're just going to take those characters and stick them in a new
yeah,
new
more or less. I mean, the wording made sense to me at the time, but a lot of people have been having issues understanding it.
Yeah, well, I did something similar with my own trilogy. I ended the series arc with the trilogy, but they're going to be off on new adventures in the new trilogy sometime in the future.
Yeah,
because I'm working on a new series with other characters now. So anyway, so obviously your series was inspired in part by Gamelit. So what are your other inspirations for it?
Honestly, I mean, that's always a hard question because the way I get inspired by things is kind of weird. I'll read sci-fi and I'll get inspired for a romance book. I'll read romance and I'll get inspired for a fantasy book. I mean, it's not like I'm reading lit RPG or gamelit and being like, oh, you know what? I bet I could do this better on this thing. It's more of I'm reading a completely different genre. And that's when this random idea pops into my head. And then I'll kind of start mulling it around. So, I mean, with this one, it was part of when I created my other series. I wanted to create this overall huge universe. And I mean, there's only the two different series that's part of the universe so far, but there's going to be a third series minimum, and then sequel series down the road as well that take place in the same worlds. But I saw a need to be able to expand on the idea that I was telling in my first book for my Game of Gods series, and that's when this story came about as part. And then just kind of exploring down the road of what other people had done in other Portal fantasy stories. And I was like, okay, well, this is how they do it, but I want to do it this way. I want something that sets it apart, which is where the house comes in. And then it ties into the dungeon and the overall environment of the entire world. I mean, just the way I wanted to do it, more or less.
That sounds interesting. So tell us a little bit about the protagonist.
Liam. I'm trying to keep him straight. I've got so many different books going on right now. Liam is a 19-year-old who just graduated high school and is in his second semester of college. And he was studying electrical engineering at college, only his second semester. So, he doesn't know anything at this point. I mean, he's got 2 textbooks and enough to say, hey, I kind of like this. I'll keep pursuing it. And then he's coming home from his classes, runs into a guy who says, repent now. The world is the end of the world is nigh. The apocalypse is coming. The kind of people you see in the movies holding the billboards saying the apocalypse. And he dismisses the guy, goes home, and is laying on his bed waiting for his firefighter father to come home, when his house is suddenly transported to the new world. And he's completely thrown out of his element. I mean, he's in a new world. He doesn't speak the language. He doesn't know anything about this world. All he knows is that he is safe inside his house because the people cannot get inside for whatever reason. And so I actually got some flack on this one because the entire first book takes place more or less with him inside his house. He does not leave it until the very end of the book with the final battle. And that's just to go to more or less his front yard. And I tried to write him in a way that made sense to me. He was the normal character who did not want to kill people. He was hesitant about a lot of stuff. And he just plain didn't understand the world. And that's where the female main character comes in, Ellie. She's a bit of a psychopath. I mean, I was going for the more colloquial term, Yandir. But I mean, it is what it is. And so some people really loved her because she was different. She was the strong female character that knew what she wanted and wasn't afraid to go after it. And I mean, I point out in the book that the weight of lives on that world is just plain different. Everybody dies there because of the environment, because of monsters, because there's just not enough food. So whereas here, we all like to believe that our lives hold weight, that we matter. Over there, they kind of don't, unless you're actively contributing to society. And so she's taking him through all of these different steps, helping him to understand. And yeah, sorry, I kind of rambled there.
Oh, it's okay. We like rambling on the show, so don't worry. Okay, so what would you say is Liam's best trait, and what's his worst trait?
His worst trait is definitely that he tends to run away emotionally. Seeing his mother die in front of him did a lot of emotional damage to him, and he went to therapists for years before finding a technique that actually worked for him. And it's one that actually exists. I mean, I took some liberties with it, but it is actually based in reality, what I have him do, which is more or less just taking your emotions, shoving them into a room, and then locking the door and forgetting about it. But his best quality is really just that he's understanding. I mean, he understands that Ellie has issues, that she was raised differently from him, but he doesn't allow any preconceptions to color his view of her, which would be really easy to do. I mean, but yeah, I mean, yeah, his best quality is definitely that he's understanding and willing to put in the effort on things like that.
So, What type of antagonists do you have in the series? Is it just like Liam against the world monsters and the environment, what, or is there an actual antagonist?
Now, there's an actual antagonist. Her name is Euronicus, and she's based off of a demon prince, which I thought was a fun little nod because she is actually a goddess, well, demigoddess of the goddess who created the world of Alaria. And I go into this whole thing, so I don't want to spoil it too much because I introduce her in the first book and then explain everything in the second book with why she's doing what she's doing. And the entire point is that she wants to free her father, who created the miasma that is destroying the world. It's a whole series of misunderstandings, people not wanting to talk to their significant other. And then, going down the slippery road of, I want to help, I'll do this one bad thing, and then I'll do another and another, and it just keeps snowballing.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, she's sort of good motivation, bad actions.
Yeah, more or less. I mean, she is. You don't even know this until the very end, when I reveal it. But
okay. Yeah, we're freezing a little bit with the camera. Okay, technical difficulties have occurred. So we'll just wait a few minutes here. And okay, are you back?
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry, where did I cut off?
No, we did. If you want to repeat it, go ahead.
Well, I don't even remember where I was. I think I was talking about Euronicus and her motivations.
Yeah.
More or less, it's just I lead the reader to believe that she is an evil character for a fair while. And then at the very end of the book, when they get closer to her, that's when I start revealing everything. I mean, before that, they had said maybe 2 words for her, so it limits what I can do with her as a character for them understanding. And then near the end where they actually start to meet up, then I can start to reveal the other side of her.
Okay. So what's the hardest type of scene for you to write?
Action. I'm not very good with action, I don't think. I want to simplify the actions a lot. I mean, he punched, she riposted. I mean, all these, fancy words that I could be using, I dumb down because I'm not an action person. And so, yeah, I settled down to the simple punch through lightning, stuff like that. I actually do better than what I'm saying just because I have time when I'm writing to put it down on paper. But I'm not a huge action fan in that regard. I like to have more of the story-focused, character-driven aspects of the story. So.
Okay, so what's your favorite type of scene to write?
The one that's clearly in my head. I mean, honestly, some of the scenes I write, I have so clearly in my head that they just flow straight from my mind to the paper. And those are my favorite scenes to write. And other times, I have to wait for the characters to actually do something. And so it takes a little while for them to write because, I mean, I'm not in control of my characters. I mean, they straight up refuse to do things I want them to do half the time. So I know where the story is going. I know the ending. I just don't know how they're going to get there exactly, outside of maybe a few vague ideas. One of my books, I had to rewrite the ending like 4 different times before I actually got there because the characters kept changing little details on that would affect the final battle, the ending.
Yeah, I think every writer watching this knows exactly how you feel.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We've all been there. Okay, so who's your favorite character?
In this story?
Yeah.
Oh. I never really went into a lot of detail on her, but Evelyn. She is the fiance of the female main character's brother and her best friend. She's only in like 5 different scenes in the entire book, if that. But I have a bunch of notes and backstory for her, and just a lot that was left out of the story that I could have included as like a deleted scene type thing. And she's just a fun character. The way she reacts, the way she keeps this brother and sister in line and stuff like that is she's a fun character.
So that kind of leads into the next question. Do any of your secondary characters have quirky aspects or are scene stealers?
Usually the animals I write in my stories. I mean, my other series, Game of Gods, I wrote this silver husky by the name of Allie. And as soon as I wrote her, I knew she was going to be popular. She wasn't the main character, but she kind of became the main character in a lot of people's minds. She's the ultimate scene stealer because you can make animals cute and fun and quirky in a way you can't with humans. And so in all my stories, I tend to include some kind of animal. And yeah, they generally tend to steal the scenes a lot.
Okay, so you write fantasy. So are there any other genres you've written in or other genres you'd like to write in?
I actually dabble in a bit of everything. I'm trying to find the main genre I want to write in because I enjoy reading everything. I read romance, fantasy, sci-fi. It's all just what I enjoy the most. I'm trying to find writing wise. So fantasy was my mainstay growing up. And then I kind of got into romance when I got super lonely and depressed. And then sci-fi, I don't enjoy quite as much, but it's kind of the escapist thing for me, where every once in a while it's really fun. And then there's urban fantasy, which I mean, everybody reads that. But yeah, so right now I've got series going for lit RPG, game lit, actual fantasy that I'm in the process of writing notes on at this point and have been for the last 12 years. Then I've got an urban fantasy story that I released under a pen name and my name. I'm trying to introduce that one for my other series, as well as an actual romance title that I kind of work on every once in a while that I've got an outline done on. So, I mean, I have ideas for every genre, including steampunk. Let's just put it that way.
Oh, yeah. Well, yes. Steampunk I can recommend. I love writing in steampunk.
Yeah, and I have a really fun idea for it. So it's just the idea is there. Now I just got to create the rest of the story.
Yeah. Yeah. The one thing I found with steampunk was taking the real history and making it steampunk, because that really bugged me at first.
Oh, yeah. And the idea I have is it takes place right after the I'm blanking on the name. War, 1860s. But it takes place right after that completes. And then the world undergoes a dramatic change. Kind of, it's what instead of how the war actually ended, this event ended the war for them. It forced the entire world to end everything for a while. And that's where the story takes up on mine, about how steam comes to rule everything. And it also has a little bit of a fantasy element to it. So.
Yeah, well, that's the fun thing about steampunk. It can be fantasy, horror, sci-fi, whatever you want it to be, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wrote a fairy tale steampunk story. So anyway, so I think we'll wrap it up here. So why don't you tell everyone where they can find you and your books?
Okay, well, you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/author Joshua Kern, I believe. And you can find all my books on Amazon under my name, as well as the series, The Dungeon Alaria. Okay,
so thank you for being here. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
And Between the Pages Book Chat, we'll be back next Saturday with another author, so please join us then. So see you later. Bye.